Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. I haven't introduced this quite that way in a while, but welcome back into the show. Brandon and I took a little break last week. I guess for those of you who tune in every week to listen in, we were not able to get a show out there. Partly it was some just technical issues and things like that, but happy that you guys are back joining us, and a lot of really cool things tonight. We're going to hit on some a listener question that definitely had Brandon and I thinking, which is always a good thing. Tell you about a guest that we have coming up, and then unpack a few things from the weekend of football. So, Brandon, how's everything been?
Good. I think the thinking part's probably a little dangerous, but but other than that, everything's been going well.
Yeah, I think the listeners are like, it's about time, right?
Yeah. Hey, y'all should have started this about a year ago, guys.
Right.
A little slow on the uptake.
Yeah. What did it finally take a listener to write a question to get these two?
Well, I was going to say it may fall in line with the question, right? Hey, who said something to make you guys finally think?
Right. Yeah. So, speaking of which, we do have, and really, guys, hopefully you all take advantage of this. We don't get to them as much as we would like as far as reading them on the air, but we do get a decent amount of listeners that will write in and leave a review, or they'll say something that they liked. And we always like when there's a question involved, because we can, gives us an opportunity to read them on the air. And, we try to discuss it a little bit and see what we can come up with. But this was a listener question from Josh in Sarasota, Florida. And he asked, and Brandon, I thought this was a really good question. He said, what is something a guest has said or discussed on the show that has had immediate impact on your life? Wow. Can you think of any?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's several, right? I mean, I can think of from a physical or a discipline that kind of made an immediate impact was with Alan Jaeger on the meditation side of things.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that was something that I put into practice and, still try to do as often as I can. And so I would say something like that. There was several guests have said it, whether you call it, being present, showing up and being curious, those types of thoughts that have been conveyed, that those are the ones that kind of snap me back and go, man, I evaluate, am I doing these things? Like, am I showing up with a preconceived idea or notion, or am I just going to kind of let it flow, and not try to force myself or the situation? And so I would say those two from a practice discipline standpoint, and then from just a true mindset standpoint, probably jump out at me.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just thinking about that this weekend. And so I'm glad that you're using this listener question tonight, because this is hard. I mean, it really is hard. Like all the things that we're talking about on here, and hopefully you listeners are understanding this, is, it's really easy for us to bring guests on that are talking about the systems and strategies. And as Brandon pointed out, just from a mindset standpoint or being disciplined, but we're both the first to acknowledge, all of the, I still feel myself, even though I talk to others about event plus response equals outcome and just choosing the right response and making the next best decision, I still feel myself getting just as, somebody cuts you off in traffic or something like that, and you just get angry, or you get, or something isn't going your way, maybe 2 or 3 different things throughout the course of the day that happen, and you get frustrated and impatient with people or whatever. Like all of the things that we're doing and talking about on a weekly basis with a lot of our guests or just with each other is stuff that we're still practicing ourselves. Like we're not perfecting any of this for sure.
Well, for sure. And I don't know. And I think, the practice of it, you don't let, perfection stand in the way of progress.
Right.
Right. And I think that most of our listeners would probably fall into the category of, a work in progress. I know certainly I feel that way about myself. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of a lot of ways to be more present, to be more grateful and all of that. And I think the biggest takeaway though is if you can be mindful of it, right? Hey,
yeah.
And I've shared this before, we talk about, hey, you have to self-evaluate. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to, have these conversations. And if you're in a room by yourself, if you can't go, ugh, like, boy, I'm not doing a very good job with that. Like I need to make some adjustments. If you can't do that, then, and I'm serious when I say this, you probably need to go talk to somebody. Like
right.
You need to be able to self-evaluate. And that's hard. It's a hard process, but I like I said, I've shared before. I mean, I've been in therapy, a lot. And, one of the things that one of my therapists said was like, hey, I think we're done. He goes, what's your takeaway? And I said, well, I at least now know when I'm being an asshole. And he said, well, then you're on the right path. Cause
further ahead than a lot of people.
Because if you can have that kind of self-reflection, it matters. So, I hope the listeners realize that, all of these practices and disciplines and concepts that are brought up on the podcast are just that. I mean, they're theoretical until you put them into practice, and
right.
And it takes time.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And for me, I think that there's 2 that, if I'm honest with myself, kind of stick out. One would be, and this was early on, in our good friend Dr. Mo Pickens, who talked about invite the challenge. And it's something that, you and I, from just a pure competitive standpoint, are always welcome to that, always looking for what's the next thing we can do. I mean, heck, you text me over the weekend, we're like, we need to get a race. We need to do something that's got us going in the right direction, pushing towards something. But it's really, for me, I think that particular phrase took on a new meaning this year professionally, because there was a lot of things at work that really I felt like were, those types of periods of transition, periods of uncertainty, where you just have to remind yourself, like, hey, this is all right. This is okay. I'm going to invite the challenge. I've trained for this. I've been prepared for these types of things. I know how to, kind of get myself in that uncomfortable state to where now I can apply some of that discipline of getting myself back into the present moment, not focus so much on the what if scenarios. And so that gave me an opportunity to do that. So I really liked that, looking at these challenges as an opportunity, not looking at them as something that's a negative, but yet something that's going to be an opportunity for me to grow out of, an opportunity for me to get better as a result of it. And then the other thing was Brian Kite, another guest that was early on, talking about behavior recipes, because this is something I've worked with a lot of teams on since then. But in really my own team at work, around this idea that, if you have a goal, is really being very clear and specific about what are those 2, 3, 4 behaviors I need to do on a consistent basis and be disciplined enough to do on a consistent basis that is going to, give me the best shot for success with that. And so those were kind of 2 of the things Invite the Challenge and behavior recipes for me were impactful.
For sure. And then, just to tag the whole behavior recipes too was, that success leaves clues, right?
Yes.
And so that recipe will yield something. And if it's successful, then, just be sure that you pick up on those clues that it's going to leave behind. So I
had an opportunity. It's funny you say that about success leaves clues. I had an opportunity to work with West Virginia Tech baseball last week and had a Zoom call with them. They're fired up about their season, and rightfully so.
Sure.
I was saying to them, one of the things that we talk about when you think about success leaves clues and you think about behavior recipes is no matter what you're doing, it's what standard you're going to commit to doing it at, right? Because, I was saying to them, I said, everybody is training right now in preseason. Everybody's lifting the weights. Everybody's doing their indoor drills, preparing to be outside. They're hitting. They're doing all of those things that at this stage of the game, everybody in January getting ready for that February kickoff is doing from a baseball perspective. But the difference is what standard you're going to do it at. Are you going to set a standard that is going to hold everybody accountable to that standard? So define what good looks like, what you're going to accept, and then hold everybody accountable to that is going to make the difference between just going through the motions and preparing and really, really doing it at an elite level to get ready.
For sure. And it sets the culture. Right. Yeah,
absolutely. Speaking of culture, great segue. It's almost like we have been doing this together for a while now. Sean McVay of the LA Rams. I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, Brandon. I retweeted it on one of the Twitter accounts, and it was talking about, we talk all the time about culture and having a culture that has very specific principles and pillars of excellence, whatever that is. And there was this really good breakdown of Sean McVay. First of all, it was talking about how, he's the winningest active NFL coach, 35 years old, and 3, probably youngest, I would say, now that I think about it. I can't imagine he's more winningest than Bill Belichick is.
No.
So it had to be
probably under 40, right? I mean, it's pretty specific. I mean, you're kind of drilling it down, right? Like, I mean, to be honest, I put myself up there with the winningest NFL coach who's over 48, right, under 50, and has never coached in an NFL game. That's me.
On Madden Xbox, I'm in a Hall of Fame status there.
But for sure, he's a very talented coach who's getting the absolute most out of his players. And if you ever get to watch either the Hard Knocks series or something like that, there seems to be a genuine affection for the way that he carries himself and what he demands from that team.
So true. And, this was something that when I was looking at this blew me away is, he's only 35 years old and there's 3 other current NFL head coaches that have worked for him. So yep. Matt LaFleur is one of them, Zach Taylor, and then Brandon Staley, which, by the way, small tidbit about Brandon Staley, was at James Madison University when my son was there. When they recruited him. So it's amazing to see that this guy is already kind of from a trajectory standpoint is now the head coach of the San Diego Chargers. I mean, this was just not that long ago. But so McVay, they just talked about some of his principles for competitive greatness. And one of the things, and this isn't unlike, they have the McVay-isms, and that's not unlike Skip Bertman and the whole Tigerisms they had at LSU. And Brett McCabe was talking about some of those things. But this was what I wanted to talk about was he has, and there was a picture of the T-shirt here that a lot of the players wear. It's like a build a culture block by block thinking, and it's using common language and shared understanding. And at the core of this, it's we, not me. So he's setting a standard right there, we, not me. And then he talks about competitive greatness and poise and confidence and what their process is going to be like and their standards and planning and practice and preparation, performance, all under that standards piece, and character, connected, consistency, and communication. And it just made me think about how important, I mean, even at that NFL level, what we just talked about is being specific, defining what it's going to look like. Like, it's really, really important for you leaders out there, for you coaches out there, to whatever you're introducing, and make sure that everybody's aligned on the language that you're using. Not just set the standard, but what does that mean? What does it mean to say, when character is important for our team, and it's going to be discipline, it's going to be accountability and dependability and coachability. Those are kind of the 4 pillars underneath character, but you have to define that so everybody in the building knows what you're talking about.
Well, and I would argue that the higher you go within, whether it's a sports organization or just a business, the higher you go, the more difficult, or the more that is a requirement, because you have professionals, you have people that at a certain level have been successful. And so, whether it's the common language or the standard that you apply yourself to, and the culture that you're trying to build, that it can be difficult at times, because you've got successful people that may think, hey, I've become successful because of this, and it may not necessarily jive with the standard that you're coming into. And so, it's interesting, kind of tying it back to the sports piece. I always find it funny to hear opinions now that come from fans about whether it's a coach or a player, and this guy's a bum, and he's this and he's that. And rarely is it that a player is a bum or a coach is, a jerk or whatever. Sometimes an individual's model for success will not allow them to buy into a new culture, period. I mean, that's, to your point, the we versus me, they can't get over that. The me is what got me to sign a 10-year, $270 million contract. That's a pretty good me. And so that may not necessarily vibe at that level. And it's the same, even with a parent, right? And a child, like, to set that culture and that standard, it can be difficult, because you've got kids that are trying to grow up, and you want them to be somewhat defiant so that they can kind of push boundaries a little bit. And there's this fine line between creativity and culture, right? And you hope that you can kind of rein it in to allow for both to foster, because that's where you become successful.
It's really an interesting thing here, because one of the things I talked to that baseball team about last week was, we were talking about teammates and just being good teammates. And I was saying, one of the key ingredients to being a good teammate is you absolutely have to be selfless. You cannot 100%. Be selfish. Like and the problem is selfish players, selfish teammates never see themselves as selfish, because in their mind, the reason that they're bitching about not getting the playing time or it not being more about them is, I just want to help the team. I just want to do my part to help the team and contribute. I know I can do more than just sit here on the bench. And so in their mind, they can justify these actions by them, that desire to want to get out there and play. And no matter how they go about it, they can justify that by saying, why are you getting on me? How are you calling me selfish? All I want to do is help the team. And they don't understand, it's beyond that. It's like, I used this example. I started watching recently In the Arena, that Brady documentary.
Yeah.
And they tell the story about him and Drew Bledsoe, that first, or I don't know, it was early on in Brady's career where Bledsoe gets hurt. Brady comes in, he goes on a 6-0 run or something like that. Well, then Bledsoe comes back, he's healthy again, and they're on the cusp of whether they're going to go to the Super Bowl or not. But Belichick decides, hey, I'm going to keep going with Brady. They go to the Super Bowl. There's a big decision to be made. And at this point, Bledsoe is not just some quarterback. He is the franchise $100 million quarterback for the Patriots. And he makes the decision that, hey, it's going to be Brady. Belichick makes that decision. Bledsoe doesn't sulk or whine or complain. He's like, you know what? Let's go. It's going to be all about Brady. I'll help him prepare. I'm going to help him any way I can. They go on, win the Super Bowl. Bledsoe says that after that, he goes fishing or something like that. And he just breaks down and cries for like hours because it hurt, but yet he wasn't going to allow that pride, that ego to take over, above the team.
Well, right. And I think it speaks volumes, from what you see in that, the type of teammate it takes and the type of commitment it takes from each player to do that. And, I would kind of piggyback on your comment about, players that are like, well, I don't get it. Why are you on me about, I think a lot of times it goes back to that self-actualization that we're talking about. Whether they've grown up and been told, right, that they can't do any wrong. It's why I feel like the culture of a team, especially when you're talking about kids until they get to that professional level, the culture of a team is it's a pretty deep spider web, right? I mean, it extends to parents, it extends to family and friends and social media and all these things that have an influence on kids today. If mom and dad, when you get in the car after the end of a baseball tournament and they start talking about, that's bullshit. You should be playing. Right. He should be playing you. That kid isn't any good, whatever. That is absolutely tearing at the fabric of the team. And ultimately, you are doing a disservice to your child. Yep. And you need to remember why they are on that team. Kids today and parents today have a lot of options, and they all typically weigh those options to find what is the best fit. And it's interesting to me that after the first weekend of a season, or even the first month of a season, they're so ready to kind of throw in the towel. So they do 4 months of research. They find that this is the best fit. You've gone through practices. You are where you are. And you get in a car and you start kind of tearing at that fabric. And that's what I'm saying, whether it's a parent, whether it's social media, whatever, it's so difficult for coaches today to keep that culture and that fabric intact. And it's so difficult for kids today to not be influenced. There's just so much coming at them and to them, and everybody wants to be a fan and everybody wants to be your buddy and this, that, and the other. And nobody realizes the impact that it has on that kid, on the team. And it's tough. I mean, it's really tough. And so, the teams that are successful at it usually don't listen to other folks, don't care what other people are saying. I mean, you hear about the insulated group. It's why coaches don't want stuff being put out that's in the locker room. Those meetings need to stay private, and because that should be a space that people can come and share the truth about what's going on. And the last thing that I would say to that is, as a coach, I'll ask kids all the time, okay, so who are you sitting? If you're supposed to be in,
right,
and you've been to all the practices, you see what I see, who you sitting?
Yeah.
You make the lineup. Tell me what your lineup is. Here's pad and paper. Or pen and paper. You make a lineup. Let me take a look at it. Yeah. And then I'll start picking it apart and see what's up. So
yeah, the barometer, the idea that if you're not starting, number one, that means it somehow is failure, right? Yeah. It means that if you're not in that starting 5, starting 9, you're sending that message, and now all of a sudden those become uncoachable kids. They become unemployable adults. Like, these are people who later on, this is all being ingrained in them. I had an opportunity last Sunday, maybe Sunday before, to listen in on a Zoom call that our friend Kirk Cabana puts on with Purpose for Passion. And he had Pat Murphy, who's the softball coach at University of Alabama, on as a guest. And there was 2 things I took from this call. One is exactly what we're just talking about right now, is he was talking about this concept of MUDITA. And that's that Buddhist saying, is having vicarious joy for someone else's success. So MUDITA is, in Buddhism, it's this idea that is the ability to have vicarious joy for someone else's success. And the question was, can you be as happy for a teammate's success as you are your own? So do you think about the opposite of MUDITA is jealousy and envy, some of the things we were talking about. And he uses example that he says when he's introducing this concept to his team or anybody, parents, meeting, whatever the case would be. He always says, he said, a perfect example of this would be, imagine if you are somebody who just shows up to a ballpark and you get out of your car, you're running a little bit late for the game, you buy your ticket, you hear the crowd roar, you hurry up and get up to your seat, and you sit down, and just then somebody's, at the plate, had just got to the plate after hitting a home run, and everyone's just piling on and everybody's cheering and stuff. True MUDITA would be, you don't know who hit the home run. You can't even tell, based on the reaction of everybody there, is who had that moment. And it's one of those things that I think a lot about, because I tell people all the time, the reason that I loved coaching so much, the reason that I got into leadership roles with the field of work I'm in now, is I truly enjoy watching other people succeed. Like, that is something that really, really excites me.
Well, I can tell the listeners this, and this is the truth. You were probably the best teammate that I ever had from that perspective. You were always happy for everybody and their success. And it's rare. I mean, that was a rare trait back when we were coming through. And it's for sure something that stuck with me. I mean, I remember in off seasons thinking, damn, man, Cullen he's genuinely happy for everybody that succeeds. And that was something that I couldn't say that was something that I felt. And along those same lines, though, John, in fairness to the players that are learning to accept that, I think it is imperative, and it kind of goes back to what you're saying with Coach Murphy and Coach McVay. You have to communicate to the players that is as successful in your role, whatever that role looks like, is critical. I can tell you from my coaching experience, the kids that help the team more than the kids that start are the kids that put it on the line every single day as maybe a scout team player, or because those kids are never going to get written up. And so, but if you have explained as a coach that when John goes out and he has success, it all is tied back and correlated to what you helped provide, then that's MUDITA.
Yeah.
If I then have an opportunity to go out and try to succeed in a game and you are sitting down, you should recognize my effort in making you great. And I would hope that you would be happy for my success. Again, that I think is where ultimately we're talking about getting to.
No,
that's awesome.
You hit on it. And look, I mean, first of all, thank you for the kind words there. I think you can tell a lot about a program whenever you see, and I see this a lot in basketball for some reason, maybe just because the players are more visible, right, on the bench or whatever, is I love at the end of a basketball game, usually when maybe it's a blowout and they let some of the other kids, some of the other players play, younger players, maybe it's the redshirt senior who is never, he was a booster favor, never, but he's still been gritting it out in practice. He's still been showing up every day. He's a good teammate. Just
going to study hall,
he's doing
all the stuff that is required of a teammate. Yeah.
And he gets his chance to get in there and he makes a basket. Maybe it's just 2 points. It might just be a slop layup with 2 seconds to go in the game. But when you see that bench erupt, you are like, that coach has done a great job. That team is right where they need to be to go on and do whatever they need to do 100%. As far as their goals, because you can't teach that. You can't fake it. But it's one of those things that it has to be developed organically. And then once you get there, man, you've got something special, because when you've got that type of MUDITA, as Coach Murphy talked about. And then the other thing, Brandon, he talked about in this call was, and it's something you and I have kind of said in different ways in the course of this show, is not this particular show, but in the course of doing this show, is he said he asks every one of his players when they come in for their meeting, he says, do you know what an intangible is? And, he'll get their definition of an intangible. And then he says to them, I really think an intangible is like, you have your talent, your skills, you have all those things that's what brought you here. But what's the one thing that you're going to do in addition to those things? What's the one thing you're going to bring to this team that's a little bit more than that? And he talked about, I think it was in 2012, somewhere around that time frame, where Alabama won the national championship in softball. And he said he had a shortstop on that team that when he asked because he brings all the players into a team meeting at the beginning of the season, and he says, what's your intangible? Come up here and tell us what your intangible that you're going to bring to the team this year, and we're going to write it down on a board. And of course, then you're going to hold people accountable for it. This one player said, hey, I'm the shortstop. Whenever the wheels are falling off and we're just going through those periods of, uncertainty or just craziness in the infield, I'm going to be that calming force for everybody. So anytime, it's all the wheels are falling off in that inning where it's just getting away from us, I'm going to be the calming force. Somebody else said, nobody is going to bring more energy than I do every day to practice. Like that, but you get the idea. So people were just coming up with their one thing they were going to do. And then what he said is he had them all write it down on a board. And then what he does is every month, or maybe it's every couple of weeks or whatever, he just brings the board back out and says, hey, Brandon, you said you were going to do this. How you doing with that?
Yeah, I love that.
So I loved it too. And I think that's the kind of to wrap that up from a teamwork perspective. That is that's that thing where it's like, you might not be the top scorer on your team. You might not be that person who's going to lead the league in assists or whatever the case may be, but you can have that intangible. You can have that one thing that you can control, that you can bring to your work every day. You can bring to your team every day. There's something that everybody has that you can commit to.
For sure. And those are the things that as a coach, I can't coach that out of you. right? I can't pull something out of you that's not there. And it's interesting because I'm at a Hawks game a week or two ago. It's Knox's birthday, right? So he's turning 14, and we're surrounded by New York Knicks fans, right? And we're in Atlanta, we're watching the game. And so as I'm accustomed to do, I start talking to everybody kind of around, and we're having a good time. And a guy checks in for the Knicks. And I said, damn, he's still in the league? And the guy next to me goes, yeah, he's still collecting a paycheck. And the first thing that I said was, that guy's I said to the fan, I said, he's bringing something to the team that they can't get from anywhere else. Because when he's been around so long, that there's nothing that he hasn't seen. There's nothing that he can't help all the younger players with. I mean, and hell, they made a movie, Bull Durham, out of an intangible catcher. He was only there to help the kid who ultimately was going to have a shot. And so, but he ends up being that guy. And anyway, my heart holds a special place for those teammates that can do it, because not everybody can. And I think it's amazing that Coach Murphy holds people accountable for their intangibles, because it's something that's it's not a common practice.
Yeah. Well, and I love it because, as we say, it's the thing that you can control. And to your point, especially you see this in the NBA, Alex Caruso, who used to play for the Lakers, who's now with the Bulls, he is, I think, the epitome of somebody who's an intangible type player game. He's not the tallest. He's not the most physically fit. But he's out there giving full out effort every single time. And I remember when my kids were little, I used to, we always talk about the control, effort, and attitude, but is like, hey, you know what? Whenever you check into a ball game, then just go absolutely full out until it's time to come out. And if you have just exhausted yourself as a coach, I would say this to players: if you exhaust yourself, we'll bring somebody else in. But just absolutely, your daughter, perfect example of somebody who is that brings so much more. Ansley was so much more than just a really good scorer. She was hustling. She'd win 50-50 balls, do a lot of those things. And I think those are things that you, like you said, you can't coach them, but man, you need them to be a successful team, because if you have a bunch of people who aren't bringing something to it, that's the other thing I like about that. It's not selfish. It's not giving. It's not getting something. It's something with an intangible. You have to give it away. Sure. You have to bring it to the table. It's like the dish you're bringing to a picnic or whatever. It's not all about you eating. You got to bring something there too. So anyhow,
absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff there. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for us. We're excited to talk about the fact that on next week's show, we actually have old friend of the show, not old, he's actually a young stud, but China McCarney is going to be back on the show with Brandon and I, and he's going to be talking about, if you remember China from Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression Foundation, check that foundation out. It's www.aaadf.org, Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression Foundation. But they have on there the mental health manual. And if you remember when we had China on before, for you listeners who heard that show, we said that we were going to get him back on the show sometime soon to really talk a little bit more about what I think is just a really great resource for a lot of people. And it's something that, China has been kind enough to say, hey, I'll come back on and we can talk about this and really get into the mental health manual, which is a modern approach to better mental health. And it goes through, all kinds of just practical stuff that you can start doing that will help you improve your mental health. Actually, Brandon, I didn't tell you this earlier. started doing the cold shower thing.
Yep.
There's a lot of research behind this. And I mean, granted, today is the only day I did it. So I'll let you know how it goes tomorrow. But today was the first day. So hopefully by next week, when we come back together, I'll be able to give you an update on that.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I'm in the process of evaluating some different cold tubs. Because I think we need to probably get a guest or two on there, because there's a lot of research as to the benefits of whether it's cold tub immersion or saunas and stuff like that. So I actually have recently got a sauna, and I'm going to start to kind of use that as well. And there's a lot of research that shows the mental benefits of that. And I'm excited to hear how that goes for you. I'd throw this out at the listeners as well. John barely touched on it, but he and I did trade some texts over the weekend about something for us to do, right? Whether it's a race or something. So if any of you listeners have any ideas on something that would push us a little bit, I would invite you to send us an email, and because we're going to do something, we just need to find the right thing. So
I love that idea. Give us a shout, and we'll talk about it, and hopefully we'll be able to share some of those ideas next week, and maybe even have 2 or 3 to pick from, and we can pick one of them and reveal that next week on the show with China McCarney. So, all right, brother, appreciate you, and we will talk with you next week.
All right, sounds good. See you.
Thanks.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.